What's up, Pathways Church? My name is Nathan Purifoy. I'm your worship pastor. Welcome to today's Daily Dose. We're in Acts chapter 28, but I'm actually going to start with a story that my dad used to tell. My dad used to tell a story about this little boy named Luke. He grew up as a farmer kid, and every day he might run off into the woods and do all this exploring. Little Luke would run through the woods, finding all kinds of things to get into, finding new areas he had never been to. And one day, he found a cave. He found a little cliff, and he crawled into this cave in the side of the cliff. And this cave was narrow, and it was small, and it was deep. And the further he went, the darker it got until he started to see a little pinhole of light. And he kept going, kept going, and kept going. And he'd come out of the other side of this small cave, and he's in a valley he'd never seen before. Luke sees this valley, and he thinks it's beautiful. He's like, let's take a peek around. And he starts walking around the valley, and he starts looking to see what's around there. And he decides, this place is so perfect. There's nobody here. This is my own place that I can come and play every single day. So Luke calls this valley Luketopia. So Luke runs home at the end of the day. He crawls back through the cave. He gets all the way to his house, and he tells his mom this awesome valley that nobody's ever found. And it's just in their backyard. And his mom, of course, is like, that's a nice story, Luke. She gives him dinner. He's off to bed later that night. She doesn't even really believe him. The next day, he wakes up. He does his chores early. He runs out of the house, and he goes straight back to Luketopia. He crawls through the cave. He ends up in the valley, and he's doing some more exploring. And he starts to look around, and he finds awesome things that are untouched nature, and it's beautiful. And then, oddly, on the second day, he sees this one plot. Something's different about this plot. There's a plant growing in the middle of this plot. It looks like he's grown up on a farm, so he knows it looks like someone's growing crops. But these aren't your normal crops. These aren't beautiful straight rows. It doesn't look like somebody has a plow being pulled by an animal. This plot, they're round. They look a little clumsy. They're not perfectly evenly spaced apart. All of the plants in this plot, there's something random about it, but he sees a person tending to these plants. So he gets scared, he hides, and then at the end of the day, he runs home and he tells his mom, I went back to Luketopia, I saw somebody growing plants, and his mom's like, that's a nice story, Luke. So then the next day, he gets up early, he rushes out to Luketopia, and he goes straight back to the plots, and he sees somebody tending to the plants again. He stays there watching them take care of these crops for a little while until he finally gets the courage to walk up and introduce himself. And when he does, he finds out that this man, his name is Roger, and Roger is blind. Roger tells him there's other people in the valley too. And Luke's like, how many more people are there? Roger says, I don't know, but there's a lot. There's my family. There's a couple of other families down here. So Luke asks if he can meet them. So Roger introduces Luke. And all of the people living in this valley are blind. He even sees their little houses, little carved out spots in the side of the hill. He sees where they live. He sees where they eat. He sees their blind children running and playing outside. They're all blind. Luke goes back home that night. He tells his mom, all the people in the valley are blind, Mom. And the mom starts getting curious now. He's like, I've heard Luke tell this story about Luketopia and these people over and over again. So she takes him into a doctor. She says, Doctor, I just need you to talk with him. Tell him this isn't real. He tells the doctor, and the doctor says, I think this is real. So then the doctor decides, I want to meet the blind people of Luketopia. So he goes out there with Luke, and he meets them, and he finds out that they have perfectly working eyes, but their eyelids are all closed. So he does one small procedure to the first kind man, Roger, that Luke met. And all he does is slit the eyelids so that he can open his eyes and see. When he does, Roger opens his eyes to a whole new world that he had never experienced before. Roger has a wife, Roger has kids, and he can't share that experience with them. He tells them, I see beautiful blue skies. I see beautiful green fields. And he says, my kids are the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And he says, honey, you should be able to see like me. And she tells him he's crazy. You're crazy, Roger. None of this stuff is real. I've never seen it. I've never heard anybody talk like you're talking. So then one day, after going through this for day after day after day, fighting with his wife about what it's like to see and being frustrated with him, Roger finally decides to close his eyes and never open them again. In Acts chapter 28, verse 26, Paul is talking to the Jewish leaders, and he says, "Go to this people and say, you will be ever hearing, but never understand. You will be ever seeing, but never perceiving. For this people's heart has become calloused. They hardly hear with their ears, and they have closed their eyes. Otherwise, they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn, and I would heal them." Just like these people that Paul was talking to, he was quoting the prophet Isaiah because these religious leaders wouldn't believe who Jesus was when Paul was telling them. And he says, this was prophesied. The prophet Isaiah told us that there would be people that close their eyes and refuse to see who Jesus really is because it's difficult. It's difficult to feel like the only one that understands sometimes. It's difficult to feel like the only one that really sees. But first of all, you have a community of other people that see. And secondly, even when it's difficult, it's not worth closing your eyes, because what comes at the end of this? If they would just understand, if they might open their eyes and see, if they would hear with their ears and understand with their hearts and turn, I would heal them. There is healing that comes with being able to see. So I'm going to encourage you to continue to look for Jesus in your everyday, continue to look for Jesus in your relationships, continue to look for Jesus in your prayers, in your worship, and in the Bible. We'll see you guys tomorrow with the Daily Dose.